Right, so we are very privileged to have a really good speaker with us tonight. I was fortunate enough to watch him in action at the York testing conference, the North or something, yeah, where he absolutely stole the show. His presentation style is fantastic. He knows his shit, and I mean really does know his shit. But before we start, Dan, I want to do what I normally do with people that come up and do the main talk. Jesus. People say that when his mum and dad met, Dan was spawned from these test crash dummies. Seriously, when they had sex, this is the results. Seriously.
Similar.
Oh, don't worry, I'm coming to that, don't worry. So I dig deep into all our researchers. I do a lot of Google searching on them. And I looked into your school days, Dan. Yeah, absolutely. So I managed to find some of your exam papers. Check this out. Oh, there's more to come. This is never ending. The thing is, I can genuinely see you doing this. And then, at sixth form, I managed to track down his tutor, and he supplied this picture. Now, that does look like you if you just had some dreads on that. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. For the record, I will say that that's made up. All the rest is true, including this bit. Okay, so on to the serious stuff. Dan is really massive in the testing community, so we're very lucky to have him tonight. He does a number of things. So he has his testing clinic, which is a free testing clinic for people starting out in testing, which is pretty awesome, just falling under the Ministry of Test umbrella. Yep,
we've partnered with Ministry of Testing.
Okay, here's Dan in one of those sessions doing some kung fu dancing.
You better get some of that today.
So I'm doing the mannequin at a minute. Okay. You've also done the How I Interview Testers. That was a brilliant session, by the way. So what do you use in an interview? Mind map.
Mind maps, yeah.
Brilliant. And of course, a podcast called Testing in the Pub. I'm so jealous I didn't think of that. Unbelievable. Chris, can we just flick the slide? So we are really lucky to have Dan here tonight. I know it's the Black Friday Eve, and I know Black Friday affects many people in many companies. So we have Godel, and we... No, down here, Chris. I know you're one-handed, but... So we have a lot of people in the room that work for companies in retail, and they're massively affected by the Black Friday. There's a lot of people working through the night. For those kind of companies, so I'm lucky enough to be here and not be one of those people that are really putting the shift in. I know there's many people in many companies, and I know Yodel are here as well, and they've got many people working through the night. So we're really lucky to have got so many of you in one room tonight, considering... did I mention Black Friday started on the very website at 8 o'clock? did I? www.very.co.uk? Just saying. Sorry, I just had to do that. Anyway... yeah. Anybody from Shop Direct in the house? Shouldn't you be working? Just saying, you know, commitments or what. Anyway, I'm going to hand you over to the beast, the animal known as Dan Ashby.
Should I just start the phone? Wow. Thanks, Lee. I've never had this ever. Imposter syndrome right now because of this build-up. Yeah, I hope you're not disappointed. What's happening with the slides here? Right, okay, cool. So thanks for that introduction. This is an incredible meetup. I've never been to a meetup like this. It's so personal. And what you guys have got going on here is fantastic. And I go to a lot of meetups, but there's nothing like this. Even in London, it's different people every time, but to hear that people keep coming back, that's incredible. So you guys deserve a round of applause yourself. These guys for organising as well. So thanks for the introduction. I don't really need to talk about these, although I will add that Software Testing Clinic, we're hoping to bring it up this neck of the woods as well. And it's not just for new testers looking to learn about testing, it's for experienced testers to get into mentoring as well and having that space, that safe environment to be able to do that. And it's been quite successful. We've partnered with the Ministry of Testing, and we're going to be at Test Bash as well for people that are interested in coming along to a full day software testing clinic session. You can buy tickets now. And then Steve Janaway, I have to mention testing in the pub, or else Steve won't ever forgive me. And then just to say, I also blog and I tweet. Feel free to tweet tonight. Tweet the slides if you like them. I'm using Prezi. And I'm always looking for feedback as well. So tweet some feedback or questions. And what was that? Where are the questions going to be?
They're on Slido. I'm just logging in now to see what the questions are.
Okay, cool. So if there's anything in the slides, use Slido as well as Twitter. And we can look at Twitter as well, right? Cool. So lateral and critical thinking. Do people know this terminology? People heard of it before? Lateral thinking? Anyone not heard of this? Okay, well, you've all went quiet. This is a really interactive presentation, so don't be shy. There is a lot of examples that we're going to work through as a group, and it's going to be quite fun and challenging. But it's all about the brain. So years ago, people used to talk about left and right brain thinking and the difference between the two. And that's very much been disputed now, but there was a really good image that kind of highlighted the difference, but of course, I'm not going to call it left and right brain thinking. But you can clearly see that one side is kind of replicating the sort of logic, sort of analytical sort of thinking. The other side is showing creativity. And for this next part, I'm going to need a volunteer just to highlight that there is a difference in these types of thinking. So who can be my first volunteer? I can get you more wine if that helps. Yeah, right, okay, so I need you to stand up. Okay, so if you stand around here, what I'm going to need you to do is the next slide is going to be words that are in a colour.
Okay.
And each word has a different colour, and I want you to say the colour and not the word. And I want you to go from left to right, top to bottom, as fast as you can, right? Ready?
Okay.
And my clicker didn't work. That was so intense. Go.
Green, red, blue, yellow, blue, black, red, blue, green, black, red, yellow, green, blue, black, green, red. No.
No, you've done so well. That's fantastic. That was so good. You've done so well there. Excellent. That was really good. And if anyone was playing along, this is really hard, right? It is really hard because one way that you're trying to think about it is you're seeing the characters and you're automatically referring back to the word, but then you're trying to look at the colour and you're trying to say the colour, but you're seeing the word. So there is a conflict there. Now, whether some people still call it left and right brain the difference, but I prefer not to because it's kind of, that's what's been disputed, but there is a difference, right? So, one way is because we think like this, mathematically, logically, it's argument and reasoning, it's very linear, it's full of process, and this is our main way of thinking, right? This is what we are so used to. Has anyone ever read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow? A few people. So in that book, he talks about System 1 and System 2 thinking. Well, you can kind of relate to some of this being across System 1 and System 2, where System 1 thinking is just automatic. Right? So if I said, what's 1 plus 1? 2. 2. Everybody just shouts out 2 because it's so automatic you don't have to think about it. But System 2 thinking is where it might be quite difficult, right? And it's quite stressful trying to think about it. So that applies here as well, because if I was to say, what's 579 times 342? You can't think about it, right? You need tools to help. You might need pen and paper, or you might need a calculator. If you were to try and think of that in your brain, it's very difficult. You would stress out quite a lot. I would probably start sweating, things like that. But this is my interpretation. This is all kind of critical thinking. And a wee note at the bottom here. Ed de Bono, he didn't coin the term critical thinking, but he uses it in a lot of his books. And he interchangeably uses the word critical thinking and vertical thinking. He did coin the term lateral thinking though, so hence why there's a relationship there, so he uses it a lot. But I'm going to continue calling it critical thinking throughout these slides. So what is critical thinking? My interpretation is that it's thinking that's led by information. This is the actual definition of critical thinking that was created by Michael Scriven and Paul Richard. But ultimately, they're saying that it's a process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, analyzing, and evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, reflection, communication, etc., as a guide to belief and action. And to simplify that a bit, this is another quote, but I'm not sure who it was from. It's ultimately saying, gather and assess information using logic in reflective manner to reach conclusions justified by reasons, arguments based on available evidence. That's my definition. Right? It's information that leads our thinking. But it's all stemmed by the Western world because of these guys. Who are these guys?
Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle.
Yeah, well done. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the Greek gang of three. And everything from these guys is based on argument and reasoning. Everything. And these guys stemmed the Western way of thinking. And here's some examples. Socrates, his emphasis was on dialect and argument. And the vast majority of his conversations, it's believed, were to kind of disprove people's theories, disprove people's use of like language and things like that. He would try and dispute argument and reasoning. Plato, he had a famous analogy, which actually, if you're reading it, it sounds quite weird. But basically, he used to use this analogy of someone chained in a cave, and all they could see was the back wall. And all they actually could see on the back wall was the reflection of people walking past a fire. So his analogy was about people can only see shadows of the truth, right? And they couldn't actually see the truth itself. And Aristotle, he used boxes. He basically judged whether anything was inside a box or not in a box. And that was the two possible states for anything. And we can see this even if we go to, I don't know, a doctor's, right? If we go to a doctor's surgery, we provide that information of our symptoms, and they essentially use that information, think critically about it, and judge us into a box and prescribe medicine based on what they think, based on the information that we supply. That's all critical thinking. So here's some examples. Anyone been to Glasgow? Yay! There's a map of Glasgow. Anyone been to Edinburgh? Now, Edinburgh's really nice. Edinburgh's the nice cobbled streets and castle. Glasgow's very gothic and grid-like. But I've always been brought up from my mum that the best thing from Edinburgh is the train to Glasgow. So down here, if anyone that has been to Glasgow, you might be familiar with George Square. It's a very nice square in Glasgow. Actually, Liverpool's very much like Glasgow. It's quite a similar looking city. So I feel at home here. It's quite cool. Well, I don't have the accent.
Back again?
Yeah, definitely. So George Square, down here in the bottom right. And there's a really nice restaurant called the Two Fat Ladies up on the top left. So if I said to you, you're in a car, using the information from the map, how would you get from George Square to the Two Fat Ladies?
Great difficulty.
With great difficulty? Because I'm standing in the way?
That's the one-way system.
Right, so you can see that there's one-way systems and you go up St Vincent Street. So this is St Vincent Street here. So how would you, you would then turn up Douglas Street? Yeah, or you'd turn up West Campbell Street?
Yeah.
And then along Bath Lane, yeah? Would everyone do that? So kind of this way? Right? Yeah, because you can see the one-way system. So you're using the information from the map, and then that's stemming your thinking to get from A to B, right? That's all critical thinking. right? We gather the information that we can see from the map and the information I've told you about being in a car, and that's stemming we're looking at one-way systems and we're working out how to get from A to B. Now if I said, okay, you're walking, that's different information, you would probably say, well actually we'd probably just walk up West George Street and then we'd walk up Blytheswood, right, and then that's quicker. But then if I told you, Glasgow's actually built on a really steep hill, and that's quite a steep hill to walk up, so you'd probably say, okay, well we'll come up here and we'll come up Buchanan Street and then along Bath Street. And then that's much easier because the hill isn't as steep, right? But the idea is still the same. We're still using the information that we're provided. We're thinking critically of that information to solve a problem, getting from A to B, right? What about this one? What's the answer?
119.
1119? Okay, cool. So you got that one wrong, yeah?
I was still trying to work it out.
Cool, 1119. So we're looking at the numbers and the symbols, and we're using that information, we're thinking critically, and we're producing an answer. And if I turned this on its side, multiplication, it's much harder, but we would have tools. We would use the tools to aid our thinking, and we'd produce an answer. And same with pen and paper. We can use that and work it out like the way that we've been taught in school, right? So an example within the software world. So software is all about information, right? We're provided, someone has an idea, they formulate that idea, it formulates into requirements, and then traditionally in waterfall, those requirements are formed by people and then passed to designers. Those designers work on it based on the information that's provided, and then they pass that to developers. Developers use that information and then they pass it to testers, and then they use that information and then they provide information back on deviations from what's expected. And then eventually we get, after many, many cycles, we get to a release, right? And even with agile, we're using information. Someone creates user stories and acceptance criteria and other artifacts like feature files, data flow diagrams, and then everybody jumps on that information and does their bit, and eventually we get to the releases at the end, right? A lot of people tend to just use the information that's supplied. Which is very difficult. And I said I wasn't going to use this. It's all critical thinking or vertical thinking, Ed de Bono, whatever. And it's really important because information is what allows us to create software, right? We're always going to have information, so we always need this thinking. But only using this kind of information is dangerous. Well, could be potentially dangerous, but it can cause many, many problems, right? I've got another exercise. Has anyone seen this passage before? If you have, please keep quiet. But I'll give you a second to read the passage, and then I've got some questions. Can everyone read this? Yep. Does anyone want me to read it out? Cool. Done? Yeah? I never know how much time to leave in this. Okay, so question one, what's the passage about? Well, pick something, what's it about? Sorting what?
Things, anything.
Anything? This is a real passage from a book, right? And the book's not that old, but maybe about 10 years old, the book is.
It's
What's that about?
Grouping procedures.
What kind of procedures? Like user stories or
Could be anything.
Defect triage.
defect triage? Okay, so we've got defect triage, so it could be about that. Anything else?
Completely unrelated.
Quantities of data. Yeah, so data. So I'm going to say bugs and data, right? What else?
As a developer, it sounds a bit like refactoring.
Refactoring, that's a good one. Yeah.
Sounds like you're describing how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
A Rubik's Cube, okay, that's a really good one. It's really interesting. Okay, what else?
It's just like a soup of
It
words.
could be anything.
Everything.
It could be anything like unrelated to testing.
Okay, maybe the second question might help, but we'll run with bugs, data, Rubik's Cube, and what was the other one?
Refactoring.
Refactoring, yeah. So, okay, so if it's about bugs, where could you go if you lack the facilities? So it says here, if you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that's the next step. Where would you go if it's about bugs? Another bug logging system. Okay. But I want 3 answers. 3 possible answers.
Okay, developer,
Developer.
TFS,
And what?
and
Cry in the corner. Okay, yeah. Okay, so if it's about data, where could you go if you lack the facilities? Who wrote it? Who wrote this? I'm not telling you. Good question, but I'm not at liberty to answer. Okay, so data's quite hard, right? We got 3 questions for bugs though. If it's about refactoring, where could you go?
So different modules in a system may have different dependencies.
Okay.
So if they don't have access to a certain dependency, I might have to go to a different module.
Yep. Okay, I'll accept that. Yep.
I might have to use a different tool.
Yep. So tools.
Yeah. And finally, I might have to go somewhere where I can actually get a Wi-Fi connection, so I can do a commit to cable or something.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that one. And if it's about the Rubik's Cube.
I'm totally wrong.
Okay, cool. I like that. Okay, so if it's about refactoring then, in here it says an error can be expensive as well, right? How can an error be expensive? List 5 possible answers.
5 is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. That's the thing.
Okay, so first of all, you can introduce a bug that could cause your system to crash,
Okay,
which would be expensive because your client doesn't want to crash.
right.
You can introduce an error that would be expensive because it might cause the system to act in unpredictable ways,
Right.
which wouldn't crash the system, but would produce some weird side effects that you don't expect.
Yep.
How many are we on?
2.
Um,
It's quite hard, right? And if it's about bugs, right? How can an error be expensive?
In terms of your reputation.
Reputation,
security,
security.
data correctness. So,
Yeah, data correctness. Yeah.
it hasn't passed a certain standard,
Yep. Standards. Yep.
and it hasn't performed sufficiently, so it hasn't performed quickly.
Hasn't performed
Like quickly enough.
quickly. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. So we managed to scrape 5 there as well, and we probably could have got a bit more, right? Okay. So we can all see the challenge here, right? We clearly don't have enough information. We don't have enough context to be able to answer these questions. And when we try to answer the first one and we move on to the second one, human nature tends to just struggle along, right? We'll try and struggle to find the answers to question 2 and question 3, apart from the Rubik's Cube, because we're like, nah, I'm wrong. Which was really good, because that's what we should be doing more of, right? We should be going back and thinking about that first question where we know we're struggling with 2 and 3, but human nature is that we tend to not do that for subconscious reasons. So, if I said to you that this passage is actually from a student handbook on how to wash clothes using a washing machine. It's a real passage about washing clothes using a washing machine. So, we know what the passage is about because we've got that context now, right? I've provided that extra information. Where could you go if you lack the facilities? Laundrette.
Mum and Dad's.
Mum and dad's? A friend's? A river? Yeah. We could, a river. We could keep going, yeah. We could keep going. The question becomes easier to answer because we've got that little bit more context, right? How can an error be expensive?
Shrinking clothes.
Shrinking clothes.
Colours in with white.
Colours in with white, yeah, I went and stayed in a hotel once and put clothes into wash and they put a red t-shirt in with all my whites and I had pink and I didn't have any more clothes there, so I had to wear pink, yeah. My choice of shirt. Okay, so we've got two. Overloading the machines. Yeah. So that. I'm going to accept two there, where you ruin the laundrette and it's their expense, and then you get a beating from the laundrette owner. So that's two, yeah. Right. One more.
Put your wallet in the machine.
Put the wallet in.
Oh, that was fun.
Thank goodness for those new £5 notes with a waterproof. No more washing money. That's safe now. Okay, cool. So even that one was more easier to answer, right, because we had some more context. But we're still using the information to stem our answers, right, to think critically of it. Okay, so let's look at this sort of other way. Lateral thinking. So with critical thinking, if we were to say, what's the quickest way from A to B, like the map of Glasgow, this would be your critical thinking answer, right? Straight line between A and B. That's the quickest route from A to B. But lateral thinking, so this, my interpretation of lateral thinking is where thinking leads to more information, right? And I've tried to represent this with the diagram, because if you think about the properties of a line and then the variables of those properties, then what have you got? You've got line shape, line length, line thickness, you've got the colours, you've got directions, you've got A going into A going off to the side, A going off the screen and back in. You've got B going into A and B going into nothing. And then you've even got a C variable down here as well, right? So we're trying to think of all the different types of variables that are part of these perspectives and properties, right, to lead to more information. And if you're looking at that saying, what the hell is that diagram all about? This is crazy. So let me talk about Ed de Bono. Ed de Bono, who wrote a really good book about lateral thinking, and he's got loads of YouTube talks about it. His book is actually just called Lateral Thinking, so that's really good if you haven't read it yet. That's one of my favourites. So he uses 4 sentences to describe lateral thinking. The first one is, you cannot dig a hole in a different place by digging the same hole deeper. Now think back to that passage for this, right? Answer to question 1, right, we think we've got it. Oh, we're struggling a bit on question 2, but we think we're getting there, and then we're on question 3. Although we're still struggling, we'll continue till we get to the end, till we've solved the problem. But that's digging a hole, that's digging the same hole deeper, right? We need to kind of go back, and at each point we need to use lateral thinking to uncover many variables, right? What's the different possible properties here? And then what's the variables of those properties, right? And then when we have that information, we can then stem more critical thinking, right? So the second sentence, lateral thinking is for changing concepts and perceptions. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. It's for changing concepts and perceptions, and also, I would also add it's for uncovering that extra information as well, right? The tools and processes of lateral thinking are designed to achieve lateral movement. So even looking at this diagram, you can kind of see where the lateral movement is coming from in that definition, right? Where we get to a point and we're trying to think of as many different possibilities as possible. And the Japanese do this really well. This is how we've got things like Kanban, right? Because they had a problem, and then they got everyone around the table and said, no idea is a silly idea, just get every idea out on the table. So everybody pitched in, and they lined up all these ideas, and then they said, okay, well, let's trial them all at the same time in parallel. And then after a week, the one that comes out the winner, the one that's the most effective, we'll use that one, right? So they literally explained a lateral movement for all the possible solutions, and then they experimented and they used lateral thinking to assist in that way, right? But whereas here would probably get someone saying, I've got an idea. No, your idea is rubbish, because I'm going to be argument and reasoning while you pitch your idea, and I'm going to disprove anything that you say because I don't like your idea, right? Rather than getting them all out on the table and then running with them to experiment, right? That's Western thinking that we've been brought up in school, right? When you're in school, even think about exams, right? You're given textbooks, you absorb that textbook information, and then you regurgitate it in part of the exam, and then you either pass or fail. If what you say in the exam matches the textbook, pass. You get. That's I said. This is live on Facebook. Shit. Okay, and then the fourth one is the techniques of lateral thinking are designed to help change from a local optimum to a global optimum. So part of this here is, well, this to me means the collaboration, right? We're sharing ideas, we're getting everything out on the table, and everybody's experiences and beliefs and biases are different, right? So the more people you have there, they're going to provide different perspectives and different properties that they can think of, and different variables of those properties as well, right? And then that moves us naturally to a global optimum rather than a local optimum, right? So, now for the fun. Lateral thinking examples. What do you see?
Head.
Guy and a woman.
A big head?
And then a woman and a man.
A woman and a baby? A dog?
An optical illusion.
An optical illusion, right? That's good. What else do you see? An old man? Yeah, a guy with a cane, yeah. What else?
A projector.
A projector. I love that. That's lateral thinking right there, because you're actually looking at the projection, right? Does anyone understand that answer?
No.
No? Well, actually, you're looking at the white screen,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, the projectors.
Yeah, but you're looking at the projected image. So maybe bit of wordplay there. Bit of wordplay. I like that. Projector, I'm still going to accept that. You're just being difficult. Yeah, so most people, that's really good, but those initial answers were focused on the picture itself, what's inside this picture or painting, right? So you start saying, the lady with the baby, or the dog, or the cobbled road, or this man here, or the big head here, and the hand, right? And then there's faces up here that people normally start focusing on as well. And then they'll say, someone said Bart Simpson in there, but I don't see it. It's still puzzling. But apparently there's 10 faces. This really irritates me because I can only find 9. But apparently there's 10 faces in there. But people tend to focus on the picture itself and what's in it. But then eventually, when you keep asking that question, you got there early, right? But if you keep asking the question, people will start saying, well, you know, I see yellow lines, I see text at the top, I see the Prezi symbol in the bottom left, I see a sort of white border that side that's not on this side. And they start breaking out that barrier, that bias of just looking at the image, right? Now, if I say image, right, people then might say, oh, actually, I'm looking at a JPEG. Or is it a JPEG? Is it a PNG file, right? That's another perspective, right, of what this is that you're looking at, right? You're looking at a presentation that's through Prezi, right? So there's loads of different perspectives. Here's another example. Has anyone seen this before? Draw 4 straight connecting lines. They've got to be straight and they've got to be connecting. How would you do it? You can shout out if you've seen it before. I've got another one.
You have to go outside the box, as it were, in order to get the...
So literally you have to go outside this box that you tend to pin yourself in, right? Because you look puzzled. But yeah, you say 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't know what's going on with that middle dot. Excuse that. Okay, so 4 straight connecting lines. Can you do it in 3? Have you seen this one, this version?
Yeah.
You have? Well, keep quiet. How do you do it in 3 straight connecting lines? Is it possible? You can tell that. It is possible, right. How do you do it in 3?
2 diagonal and 1 horizontally through the middle.
They've got to be connecting.
That would connect in the middle.
2 diagonal.
It would connect in the middle. If you drew 1 from the top left to the bottom right, and then 1 from the top right to the bottom left, and then 1 through the middle, they'll connect in the middle.
But then what about here?
What about the outside dots? What about the outside?
And they've got to be connecting on the ends. I've just provided more information there. They've got to be connecting on the ends of the line.
Is this
Oh, get out of the way.
taking it out to infinity? So it goes back how the lines are drawn.
Oh, so now you're starting to think laterally. So what property of a line are you thinking about there? It's length, right? So that's one property of a line. What other properties of a line are there? It's width, right? Oh, okay, so this becomes easy now, right? Zoom out and you get 3 big fat lines, right? So when you strip it back and you're trying to solve the problem, yeah, we're always trying to solve a problem. But to solve the problem, what are the different variables within this problem that we can play with that might help us solve the problem more efficiently, right? Let's use some lateral thinking for that. So can you solve it in 1 line?
Yeah.
Of course you can. Zoom right out so that the 9 dots is 1 dot, right? And then it's 1 line straight through the middle, right? So yeah, the properties of a line. I gave you all these properties of a line earlier with that diagram. So that was good thinking though. Okay. We need to use lateral thinking. Thinking about all these variables and perspectives and all that sort of stuff. Even if you think about different perspectives when you're using your software, right? There's always going to be different perspectives. There's always going to be different stakeholders. Your customer isn't always your user. The customer might be this person paying for the software, but the user is their customer, right? So think about even different perspectives from that angle. And then users of the system as well, different user types, right? And think about even if you take a plain input field, right? Did you guys know that there's about 90 different ways that a plain input field might fail? Just a plain input field. It's about 90 different ways when you think about the data, the amount of data, how you interact with that field, how it interacts with the system. Where does the data go, for example? Does it trigger other information? Where is it displayed? If the data that you enter in that field, is it in other reports? That's already different properties that I'm listing for this feature of an input field, right? But then what are the variables there? So even if we say input method for that field, right? Well then you've got a mouse and you've got a keyboard, but you've got a file menu that you can paste from as well. You've got the keys there as well that you can use. You've got a tab key to move on to the field or off, the enter key or the space bar. There's a whole different ways that we can interact with that field. So these are variables just with that one property of how we use a text field, right? If you are, is there any developers here? 1, 2, 3. Testers, you need to invite your developers along here because that's a different perspective as well, right? But usually, there is a bit of a difference between how testers think about how things might fail and how developers think about how they might create it, because you might not necessarily think about how many different ways this is going to be used when you're writing that text field. But everyone should be thinking about this, right? Okay, so what about creating quality software? How's this all related? I've kind of spoke about how it is related a little bit anyway. But for me, I see software development, that full sort of cycle, being multiple activities, and I'm breaking it down into 4 different types of activities here. There's testing activities. We know that we need to investigate and we test the ideas, the idea of the software. If someone says, hey, I've got a cool idea for a new feature, we can test that. We can test the design, we can test the code. We can test the features, we can test the platform as a whole, we can test our processes. So these are all testing activities, right? We've got the checking activities, which is where we have an expectation, and ultimately we're asserting that expectation. And we do that through unit checks or integration checks or automation in general, or if anyone still uses scripts with actions, expectations, passive fail column. That's still checking, that's important. But they are checking activities ultimately. It does development activities, so this is scripting and coding, obviously building new features or writing the automation scripts. And then there's design activities, which could be UX or UI design, wireframes, flow diagram design, things like that. These are typically the four activities. Within that, we've got lots of processes as well. But lateral thinking applies to all of these, right? Especially the testing and the investigation, right? So, and that relates to all of these within those activities as well. So whether it's requirements or user stories, claims made about the product. People have sales guys, right, who generally create sales and marketing material before we've even got requirements. So that's claims made about the product, that we should use that information, but we should think laterally and critically of that as well. And we've got various stakeholders and all this sort of stuff as well. So this is a really good quote from Alan Page. Good test design comes from good test ideas. And I think this nicely sums up with the test ideas, the good test ideas. I can easily relate that to lateral thinking as well, right? Because if you think about any of these properties or variables within, there's always that what if question. Well, what if we put an ASCII character in this text field? We don't know what it's going to do, but we can investigate and uncover that information about what it actually does, right? Or if you're testing the idea at that point in time, you can ask a product owner what they think it should do and then talk about it with the team, right? So you can still test the idea. And it doesn't matter what processes you use with this type of thinking as well. Does it? I know I put RAD up there. Does anyone still use RAD? Does anyone know what RAD is?
What's RAD?
Rapid Application Development. It's kind of along the lines of XP. That relates to agile as well, I think. And then, of course, Scrum, Kanban, Waterfall. It doesn't really matter what process you use. These thinking skills are very important in any sort of process, right? So, being from Glasgow, I like my alcohol. So here's an example that references a wine glass, which I think we ran out of earlier, right? We don't have any wine glass? Oh well, so we don't actually have to physically test a wine glass. We're going to test, well, there's a bug.
This was
For the video,
yeah.
what is this? Is this a Jaeger bomb glass that you're drinking wine from?
Yep.
It's empty.
Improvising.
Okay, so here's a sample user story, very basic. As an employee of the bar, I want a wine glass so that I can serve wine to customers. Don't judge me on my user story. It's a bit rubbish, but I've seen rubbish user stories, so it applies. And here's some basic acceptance criteria as well. The wine glass must comfortably hold wine, and it must be possible to drink safely from the wine glass, right? So, how would you test this requirement? How would you approach this requirement? Expensively. What does that mean? You would buy lots of wine? But this is a requirement that we're testing, not an actual product, right? So we're testing the idea here. Right? Yeah, true. Research. I like that. Any excuse to buy wine, right? Yeah, totally. Okay, so thinking about the variables, ambiguities, perspectives, properties, all that sort of stuff. What questions would you ask of the wine glass?
How big people's hands are that are using it?
How big people's hands are? Okay, that's a good question.
How big they want? Whether they wanted a small, large, or...
Oh, so how...
The expert there.
Okay, so how big should the glass be? As in small or large, or...
What sort of wine will the glass be holding?
Good one, because different types of wine require a different type of glass, right? So that relates to shape.
Define comfortably.
Define comfortably, right? So now we're asking questions about the specific words, right? comfortably be a play product owner. I wasn't planning on playing product owner because I'm a rubbish product owner. But product owners that I've worked with in the past have been rubbish too, some of them. So I'll play product owner. Comfortably means it should feel good. I'm going to be really vague.
What about like certain wine glasses are a shape so that you get massive wine glasses if you've got in restaurants that sell really expensive wine so that you can savour the wine, but also champagne glasses are designed differently so that they hold the bubbles in?
Yeah, so you don't just have type of wine, but you've got the shape of the glass within that type, right? That's really good. That is because you've got different sized bowls, things like that. So that's a really good question.
And type of glass, because you can have glass that looks nice but actually is corroded by the wine or whatever, it's still good.
Yep.
Reacts with it, gives a natural taste. So
Yeah.
what sort of glass do you want?
So type of glass.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an assumption.
You can have, okay, but what the material it's made of, you can have something that looks nice but it's impractical.
Yep.
So you have to look nice and also be practical for the product wine.
Yeah, so you've touched on two there, right? You again, similarly to the type of wine and then the properties within that type, you've got the material and then the properties within each type of material as well, right?
I want to check the margin, so what's the standard, what sort of size of glasses?
So now we're talking about standards, right? Which is important, which varies based on country as well, right? I was really disappointed when I went into New York, into an Irish pub in New York and asked for a Guinness. And the barman apologised to me. And I was like, what, is the Guinness really bad here? And he was like, no, it's the size of the glass. Because the pint glass in America is much smaller than a pint glass here. Which is interesting.
And the thickness of the glass as well.
Thickness as well, yep.
Talking about safety.
Talking about safety, so yeah, thickness.
Does it have to be glass? Can't you change the material?
Well, that's what we had. So different materials as well. Give me an example of where we might want plastic. Glasgow. I like that, it's so good. I walked right into that one.
If you had a cool wine, like a white wine, you'd want a chilled glass as well, so you have to...
Ah, yeah, so temperature, right? Temperature is another variable there. Yeah.
Are we not, like, can't we just take the lean approach, get the cheapest off-the-shelf solution, start using it for a bit, see how many people die and see how many people have?
Okay, so here's the problem, right? You jump on that and you produce a wine glass that looks like any other wine glass, but then I tell you, hold on a minute, I'm a product owner and I'm in a festival bar, and you've actually given me a wine glass that isn't stackable and it's actually glass and people are going to throw this?
Yeah, so we'll find that out when all this bad thing.
But it's too late, my festival's right now and you've supplied all the glasses to me right as I'm going live.
You need to ask what the employee is of.
Yeah, so the questions, so there's a heuristic that I use here, which is just the 5 W's and an H, right? And I use these questions, 5 W's and an H is just what, why, who, where, when and how, right? And I use these questions as triggers, right? So if I say the question what, right, I'm going to say, well, okay, what type of glass, what type of bar, right? What type of customer, right? And I'm thinking of these like what questions, right? I missed that.
You went into your martial art mode then?
I did. I heard Siri. I'm a Microsoft fan and I heard Siri. I know. Yeah, so you're using these questions to stem sort of, as heuristics to stem ideas for other questions, right? Where is a big question, right? Where is this going to be used? So we've said festival bar, right, as an example. And another story that I've got is from a bar when I lived in Shanghai for a while, and it was a really trendy bar, and it actually had a puzzle to get into the bar where you had to put your hand in holes and find a button. Really cool. It's not very good for drumming, but we eventually got into the bar, and I was there with some people from Glasgow. We drank a lot of wine, but when they served the wine, it looked like a normal glass, but it didn't have a base. Instead, they served it with a block with a hole in the top and you slot the stem in. We were thinking, wow, this is a really cool design. Until later on in the night when they ran out of blocks, so when we were trying to buy wine, we couldn't put our glasses down, right? Which, design flaw, worked with people from Glasgow, because we don't really put our classes down anyway. But yeah, it's things like that where that's just another type of where, right? So asking these questions is going to uncover more information, right? And we're using heuristics and things to assist our lateral thinking there. Cool. So here's about 20 minutes worth of ideas that I could think of, and ripping images from the web, and drawing up a mind map of testing notes, testing the idea. So I've got lots of questions. But in this, I haven't followed the 5 W's and an H. I normally would. But you can see we've got shape. We've got different types of glasses, which result in different types of properties. We've got the base, the material, the dimensions, the pattern, its weight, capacity, regulations and standards with measurements and countries. And then we've got other questions, for example, what kind of bar? Why does this... He's having a smashing time. Why does this need to be tested? Things like this. What are the other risk areas that we haven't thought about yet as part of those acceptance criteria? But you guys did really well. You guys got most of these, or all of these actually. So, cool. So lateral thinking skills, they can be learned and enhanced. And it seems difficult at first. I mean, some of these challenges you might have looked at thinking, 3 lines? What the hell? But you can see that through practice, through playing games and exercises, it becomes much easier. And then once you relate those practices to work, it becomes even easier still, and keep practicing. And there's a couple of books, Ed de Bono's thinking course, or his lateral thinking book as well. And it teaches about, you can also search for critical thinking and lateral thinking puzzles, or search for logic thinking puzzles, but think about the properties and variables and disprove that solution. That's another thing that's quite good to do as well for practicing. And then, of course, I've mentioned thinking fast and slow, which the System 1 and System 2 thinking applies to both lateral and critical thinking. But if you're getting into learning about this, it's a really good book to read.
It's very difficult book to read.
Oh, it's a very difficult book.
I think I need to read it again.
Yeah, it's one of these books where I like to jump in and then quit for a while and then jump in. Or get the audiobook because you're listening. But the hard thing with the audiobooks is that they tend to reference examples in the actual book. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh God, no. Because I want to try and do the examples. So key takeaway for today, just awareness. It's awareness of this different type of thinking. Awareness that there are other properties and variables and perspectives and scenarios that you're not going to think of like ever, right? There's always going to be problems at the end that other people think of. Users will find stuff because people haven't thought about that situation, right? But the idea is that it's awareness so that we can use lateral and critical thinking skills to try and uncover as much information as we can throughout, starting from the idea, starting from when someone says, I've got a cool idea for a new feature, or I've got a problem that needs solved, right? And then take that through the design, take that through the artifacts, take that through the coding, and then the development and testing and checking activities, right? And then I'll share these slides out as well. But that's me at the end. Any questions? Oh, thanks. Loads of questions?
We've got some questions, but before we do the questions, can I just say that there's a guy in the room who actually signed off the purchase order for the beers, pizza, the sponsorship. He's from Godal. He came late. He should have been at the front, but he's at the back. It's Neil. He's the CEO. Just in case Neil had to shoot up, I really wanted to call out that Neil was behind the guys, gave them full support in sponsoring tonight, and I'm really pleased that you made the effort.
That was a bad photo to use though, that. It's like, like the shit next bubble.
Well, I just wanted to say...
Now everybody sees the size of it, it's like, no, it's
well, I just wanted to say thanks, I didn't know whether we needed to shoot up or anything, but no. Just wanted to call it out. So we've got a few questions for you.
Yep.
Can we take the ones from slide first, because we're a digital gathering. Okay, so we've got one from someone that's called themselves a curious explorer. I like the name, Shivaji. Sorry, I've just called you out. So, is agile a journey? It's not necessarily related to your questions, but these came in before you gave your talk.
Totally fine.
So, is agile a journey or is it a destination? Do we know when we are agile enough?
Oh.
That's your question, that's cool.
Agile enough? What does that mean? So agile enough. I've worked in so many companies that say that they're doing agile, but they've never done agile the same way. I think it's, for me, it's kind of a mixture of a mindset and an approach to software development, right? So that's what generally a methodology is, right? To transition towards agile, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to transition, and that's why you kind of have to do it in stages. But there's so many different flavors as well, so like Scrum, Kanban, for example. So I think before you can think about your end goal, you kind of have to think about your context, right? Context is key, and your sort of attitude, everyone, the company's attitude and the team's attitude and things like that. And be able to take all that context into account and think about what your possible solutions are. And it does kind of relate to lateral thinking as well, because you can trial, you can experiment, you can think about many different sort of ways of working and approaches to developing software. And then experiment. If Kanban works best, then fair enough. If it's Scrum, then that's fine too, you know? Yeah. But I think everybody has to go in with an open mind. Ultimately, if you've got people that are going to fight back because they don't like change or there's a fear of change, it's never really going to get to that point where it's working smoothly.
Okay, we'll probably do a question from the room, question from slide, just to keep the traction going. So, question from the room, anybody? Yes.
Is it possible that in some context, if you start to go on a bit laterally, that the people with the power in the room, whether they're more senior developers or project management, take that as a criticism of their original plan, or that you're trying to delay and not do the work? Have you got like one or two sentences to explain succinctly why it's worth to try and convince them?
So I think the problem there isn't the lateral thinking. I think the problem is the communication and how we communicate. Right? If we go in with that argument and reasoning approach and say, oh, no, that idea is no good, that solution to solve that problem isn't very good, right? Then people are going to get their backs up, and it's going to cause drift. It's going to cause that argument, right? That argumentative sort of stage. But if we go in using more effective communication skills, that's one possible solution. Are there any more? Anyone? Do you know what I mean? Sort of working round inviting other people to bring other possible ideas to the table, right? And then let's talk about the problem itself, right? So there's an experiment that I run as part of workshops, and I try to say I can guess who are developers in the room and who are testers, and then I'll say people might have actually heard of this challenge as well. I'll say if you have a box of tacks, a candle, and a single match, how would you stick the candle to the wall and light it? Anyone? Right, so you light it first, and then use, what did you say, use the tacks to stick the candle to the wall? Or?
Hot wax, candle.
So use the hot wax to stick it to the wall. Right, okay, so that's one solution, right? But I would say that you're kind of a developer background. No? What?
Yeah.
Sales? Oh, well, that's the same. But basically, the testing mindset would be to start questioning, right? Well, how big's the candle here, right? How big's the box? How many tacks have we got? Why have we only got one match? What if I light it and it doesn't light the candle? If I failed, can I get another match, right? You're kind of, the lateral thinking skills is kind of along the same lines of those questioning. Everybody should have those skills, right? So you want to encourage that through the communication, right? And influence, like, so I wrote a blog ages ago about using tea and how I find tea that you drink is the most effective test tool, right? Because of all the challenges that we've got with misconceptions and things in communication, people don't invite us to meeting. But if you use tea and donuts, people love a donut. Or pizza. If you use them as sort of influence to influence, it's a rule of reciprocation. So you give someone a donut and then they will do you a favour. It works. So.
Do we have Gordon Crawford in the room? Gordon, do you want to shout out your question? Nice and loud.
How do you get your team to engage with learning these kind of test skills if they come into the role from sort of domain areas? So we've got a deep domain knowledge, and that allows them to get by for quite a while.
Yep.
How do you get them to engage with learning other test skills?
Good question. Yeah. So one thing I try and do. So we know from here there's a huge external community, right? But we know that some people that we work with might not be able to afford the time to come along to things like this. So what I try and do is build an internal community where it's a safe space to run talks like this, or run lean coffee sessions, or get together and just talk about testing. So having that space and making it safe allows people to learn. So that's what I try and do in that situation to help the team grow as well.
Question, Dan?
I was interested in what you said about, you talked about philosophy and fathers of Western philosophy in some respects. It's kind of got me thinking about almost like the difference between East versus West and the way that we're sort of, our culture makes us think about things. So I suppose the question I've got there is, do you think there's a tangible benefit to actually having displaced teams around the world looking at a particular product? Do you think
possibly? Yeah, I think possibly. I worked in a really good team where actually we were based in London, but none of us were English. There was a Welsh guy, there was me, there was a Brazilian guy, there was a Polish guy, there was an Indian guy, and it was just a really good mix because we all had different cultures and experiences, and we all brought something different to the table as well, so that worked effectively, but we were all co-located there. I think if you have a distributed team, it's going to be much harder communication-wise, but you might have different ideas and things, so it could still be effective that way. What I think would be good is if we just try, right, so kind of what I say about the Western world, we need to change the way that we're thinking here, right, as well as other countries as well, changing the way that they think demographically across the world, right? And one thing that some people like Edibon are trying to do are trying to get lateral thinking into schools to be able to do that. So future generations, it might not be as much of a challenge. But for now, I think it might be a good idea to mix teams. But yeah, it's going to have its challenges if it's distributed. But different challenges, right? Time zones and all that sort of stuff. It's a nightmare.
Because I've worked in a mutual team.
Yeah, so I've got.
It's a challenge. It's great, and then you can be able to see from different perspectives.
Yeah.
There are so many other issues there.
Yeah, I've got a team in Guadalajara in Mexico, and I've got a team in Chennai in India, and they don't even overlap time zone wise. So if I want a team meeting, someone's either going to have to work late or someone's going to have to work early, right?
To me, those are all challenges that we can overcome.
Yeah.
If they are finding bugs that maybe the team will find, then it's worth it.
True.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, we're going to have to move on. We've got loads of questions on Slido, which we can probably answer on Twitter.
Yeah, or if I log in, I can log in and answer, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing is, Dan's going to be in the pub after.
Yep.
So, a round of applause for Dan Ashby!
Thank you.
Thanks. Can you have the mic?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cheers, mate. Nice one, Dan. Absolutely superb. A different picture this time. I like. I shouldn't really do that, should I? That's a real Homer Simpson moment, that, isn't it? You think it and you shouldn't really say it. Right, so have we got any other flash talkers? Claire, come on! And I really hope the Ministry of Testing are watching this. So Contestant number 4, what's your name? Where'd you come from?
I'm Claire and I work for Avecto in Manchester.
And what are Avecto?
They are a cybersecurity company.
Oh.
That's not what I'm talking about, though.
No, it's not. But anyway, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, God, there's a lot of you. Okay, right. So, I am not a new tester. I've been testing for about 10 years, but I am fairly new to the testing community. I've only kind of found out about it a couple of years ago, and come to the Liverpool Tester Gathering. We all come to this and go to the Manchester Tester Gathering if you go to that, and we all do all these great things for free, things like the software testing clinic as well. And I wanted to be able to kind of give something back to the community. I'm not a conference speaker, I'm no Lee, I'm certainly no Dan Ashby, but I came across something that Rosie from the Ministry of Testing was setting up, which was a writers group. I don't have a blog, I've never written anything in particular, so but it was something I thought that I could do and make a contribution, and I just wanted to encourage that anyone who was kind of interested in doing some writing, or even if you've not done any before, it doesn't matter, because I certainly hadn't, get in touch with Rosie from the Ministry of Testing or Mel Eden. They're really good kind of editors and reviewers. I'm doing kind of some more articles. I know Jem's doing something as well, and they're just fantastic. They give you loads of support and help, and it's a really good way to kind of make a contribution if you're not for kind of standing up here and talking, you know, about testing. So there you go.
So, was this your first talk in front of this many people?
Yes.
How did it feel?
Terrifying.
How do you feel now, though?
I'm glad I did it.
Round of applause for Claire! Yeah! Woo! One last flash talker. Anybody? Come on, Stefan. Stefan's travelled all the way from Sweden. Yeah! I've just lied. Stefan, I've stereotyped actually. Stefan, what's your name? Where'd you come from?
My name is Stefan.
No way.
My name is Stefan and I work with CSC.
Okay, so the floor is yours, mate.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to Dan for having reminded me of somebody many, many years ago who changed my life, who changed the way I looked at things. I was in my 20s and we were at a party and the two of us were sat on a settee and somebody had let go a balloon. There was a yellow balloon that floated all the way up to the ceiling. Now this was a converted warehouse, so the ceiling was very, very high. And the guy said to me, he said, "How did you get that balloon down?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know. How would I get that balloon down?" So I was thinking about, oh, you'd need a really, really tall ladder to get to it, or you'd need to pile furniture on top of each other to get to it. And then in the end I said, "Oh, I'd probably just shoot it down." And he looked at me and went, "Nah, that's not what I'd do. I'd fill the room with helium." And that changed my life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, guys, so we're gonna ramp it up. It's been a long night. You've been absolutely amazing tonight. I think this has been one of the best tester gatherings we've had. I'd like to say a huge thanks to you guys for coming. So a round of applause for you guys. For our host, Launch 22, are sat out there waiting for us to go home. For our sponsors, Godel Technologies. Big Dan at the back. The Flashers. Sorry, Claire. And everybody else. So the guys who make this happen, which are Chris, Phil, Amy and Duncan. So someone keeps waving some stuff at me, a box of heroes.
It's a bribe for the...
Oh yeah, shit, yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot. So yeah, the feedback box, you get a sweet if you fill some stuff out. How cool's that?
A miniature hero.
A minute, oh, love that, brilliant. So what's next? The most important thing is next. That. Thank you so much.